Strange but true stories, tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. Now you see me, now you don't. We've all heard that line before, right? An old magician's line, or maybe in a movie. But think about that for a moment. If something was visible to you, and then an instant later was no longer there without seeing it go or be taken away, and really no logical explanation for its disappearance, that would kind of freak you out, wouldn't it? Well, today we have two stories sent to us by viewers just like you, where that sort of thing happened to them. Strangely, though, in our first story, the disappearing part may not be the weirdest thing about the encounter. Let me start off my story by saying that I have been an avid hunter and outdoorsman since I was really young. I loved nature, and I loved to be able to see and hear things that most people will never know about. I would like to think that in my teenage years, I was a very accomplished stalk hunter, seeing as I had taken several deer a year by stalking them from the shadows of the trees. I also felt close to the old tradition because I used an old side hammer muzzle loader. I don't think I even wore camouflage all the time either, but always seemed to find satisfaction in the truly fair chase nature of my hunts. Now, to the day I saw the man. I had found a different area to hunt a few days earlier. It was a place my uncle had hung a stand in years prior. It had a stand of pine trees on the left side, hardwoods to the front and right, and a field behind the tree where my uncle had hung his stand. Now, the stand was gone, so I just made a quick blind in the pine trees before the sun rose and began my wait. Hours went by, and I saw nothing. The cold wind kept me awake. I called, but nothing took notice of me. As I was beginning to think about lunch, I heard him. The sound was so soft that it almost seemed like the wind was crunching the leaves. At first I thought maybe it was a deer, so I got my gun up and waited. Time seemed to slow down, and my heart began to pound as my mind began to race with thoughts of a big buck. Then he appeared from behind a tree. Trying to control my body, I lowered my gun because it wasn't a deer that I saw. Instead, it was a man. Now, the man did not look like he belonged here. And by here, I mean in this time. His clothes looked like something out of the mid to late 1700s. He had a large brimmed leather hat with metallic buttons that held on a braided leather hatband. His hair was long and scruffy, and so was his beard, as it was about midway down his chest. His cheeks were red, and so was his nose. He had a determined look on his sun-weathered face. Now, these features here in the mountains of Virginia are common, so common that they could describe about half the guys in my town. He looked to be about 40 or so, but if his hat seemed strange, then his other garments would send shivers down your spine, because they did mine. He had a tanned leather jacket that looked like it was pieced together from multiple deer hides with the fur to the inside. He had a dingy white shirt with a collar and pieces of wood carved in an oblong shape and leather strips that tied them to one side of the shirt, and the buttons ran through holes on the other side. His deerskin pants and boot-style moccasins were both laced with leather. There weren't any buttons or a zipper on his pants, but instead there were leather laces like you'd have on a shoe. The sight of this man in the sun made me quiver in astonishment, fear, and disbelief. It was at this moment that he saw me. We locked eyes. He was 40 or so yards away from me, but he was definitely going to head my way. As he approached, we exchanged the normal greeting and asked questions about seeing any game. Both of us looked at each other in astonishment. It felt like he knew that I was going to be there, or as if he already knew me. His old Kentucky rifle looked like it was from a museum. He admired my gun and asked me if he could take a look at it. I agreed, and we swapped rifles for examination. His was much longer, but way lighter than mine. After looking it over, we swapped back. About that time, we both heard the unmistakable crunching pattern of a deer. I looked at him, and he smiled and moved behind me and squatted down. As he put his hand on my shoulder, he told me to get my gun up. As the deer moved towards a clearing where I could take a shot, this man walked me through calm breathing to steady my nerves. When the deer came into the clearing, he told me to fire, and I did. Unfortunately, my gun went pop, not boom. Again, I was shooting a muzzle loader, so it takes black powder, which is very high maintenance, and the powder never ignited from the percussion cap. So a misfire, but the percussion cap had gone off. That scared the deer, and it scampered away to safety. I still felt the man's hand on my shoulder, but as I stood up and turned to speak to him, he was gone. As in, vanished. He hadn't walked away. He hadn't run away. He had disappeared from behind me after my shot. And again, I could still feel his hand on my shoulder until I stood up. I searched for him for, probably 20 minutes, and I never saw him, even though the woods there were wide open. Another weird thing was that when I got home, the gun was able to fire without an issue. I've never had that sort of misfire happen before that day, nor has it happened since, because I have always kept my guns in great order and cleaned properly. Had I been daydreaming? No. He was real. Real to me. Solid as the trees around us, and moving like the deer that I had been hunting. I've told several people most of the details of that morning, but they usually dismiss it or kind of joke about it. But I know what I saw. I'm 29 now, so 14 years ago, and I still remember every detail of him. I still wonder about who he was, and where and when he came from. Now for our second story. As a child, I had many fears. Fear of the dark, fear of monsters under the bed, and I wasn't that fond of snakes, to be honest. But my fear of being left alone may have been at the top of the list. I could be in a crowded mall, but turning around and not being able to find my parents or a friendly face was terrifying. Something like that, but in a much more mystical way, happened to the woman who submitted this story that happened more than 40 years ago. This happened when I was about 12 years old. We lived in Las Vegas, and my parents decided to take us, that's me and my 2 brothers and 1 sister, to the lake for the day. Here in Vegas, that would be Lake Mead. It's a man-made lake with some places similar to being a beach area, but not quite a beach. I remember it being pretty rocky, as a matter of fact, but nonetheless, it was the lake, and it was very hot outside. It was crowded that day, so lots of people were on the beach and in the water. Several families were barbecuing, and a few people had RVs, since there were camping grounds there too. We found a spot on the rocky beach area. We laid our towels out and our chairs and an ice chest full of sandwiches and drinks. My mom had bought me a raft and suggested I go float in the water, and since I was sweltering hot, that seemed like a good idea. I dragged my raft to the water, hopped on and laid on my back and let the water drag my raft and I gently through the water. It wasn't windy, so I just kind of floated there. I closed my eyes to get some sun and just enjoyed the splashes of water from the others swimming around me. Now, as I said, it was a crowded day, so at least, 50 other people were there at the lake area we chose. I would estimate I had been on my little raft for about 15 minutes with my eyes closed. It was then that I noticed it had gotten eerily quiet, and the water was still. I opened my eyes and looked around. All the people were gone. No one in the water, no one on the beach, no more RVs. Nothing looked the same. I got really scared. Again, I was only 12 years old. I started panicking. Had I drifted to another part of the lake away from everybody? That didn't seem possible. I couldn't hear or see anyone. I started paddling toward the shore, my heart pounding out of my chest. All I wanted at this time was my mom and dad. The beach area even looked different, so I was confused, scared. I kept hoping I had drifted downstream to another area, even though I knew I hadn't, not in that short amount of time anyway. And why was it so quiet all of a sudden? If I had drifted off, I would have heard people and the sounds would have faded, not disappeared all at once, right? As I was paddling, I was thinking to myself, just paddle to the shore and find a park ranger, and he'll find Mom and Dad, and everything will be okay. I was trying to find some comfort. I was concentrating on paddling towards the shore, staring at the water as I'm doing so. And I looked up to make sure I'm going in that direction, and everything and everyone was back on the beach or in the water. I once again heard the people in the water splashing and laughing. I saw Mom and Dad in their chairs on the rocky beach. I saw the RVs there, too. I paddled as fast as I could to get out of the water and safely on the shore with my mom and dad. I was shaking. My mom just thought I was cold from the water, and so she wrapped me up in a towel. I was mad and confused, and I asked them why they had left and where had they gone. My mom looked at me strangely and said, "Left? What do you mean? We've been right here watching you and your brothers and sister the whole time." So I told her what I had just experienced. Everybody disappeared, and then they were all back. My mom thought I had been out in the sun too long. It wasn't much longer that we all piled into the car and went home. When we got back to our house, she put me to bed immediately, thinking it would make me feel better. But I know what I had seen and not seen. I'm 55 now, and in the 40-plus years since, I have not gone back to Lake Mead, and I never will again. I'm just wondering if this or something similar has ever happened to anyone else. If so, please help me understand what happened, because I cannot wrap my mind around this experience. This has been another strange but true stories. Time to tell us what you think. Both of our story submitters for today are wondering about their experiences, and if there may be a logical explanation for it. In the first, an appearance by a man from a seemingly different time period. And in the second, a disappearance of everybody around her, left alone and scared in an unfamiliar place for a short period of time. Leave your comments below, and if something like either of these situations has happened to you, it may provide some comfort just knowing that they aren't alone in their experience, and maybe some comfort to you as well. If you have a story of a strange occurrence in your life that you would like to share with us, we'd love to read it, and it may just make a great episode of SBT. Send us your experience in an email with as much detail that you can remember to strangebutTrueStories2@gmail.com. Like and subscribe and click the bell. All that stuff helps us out. Thanks for all the support, and thanks for watching this video. I'm Steve White. Until next time.